You've been disrespected more times than you can count, smiled through it, laughed it off, stayed calm. But deep down, you hated how it made you feel. You stayed quiet not because you didn't care, but because you didn't want to look emotional. You thought that was strength. But now, they think you're weak. That's the trap. You're damned if you speak. You're dismissed if you don't. And somewhere in that tension, something inside you snapped. You realized, this can't go on. You're not here to be a doormat. But you're also not here to shout and beg for basic respect. So what's the way forward? Because here's the truth. The modern world doesn't reward, silence it, exploits it. If you don't know how to command respect, they'll keep crossing your boundaries until you forget where they were in the first place. And no one teaches men how to navigate that with strength and restraint. No one shows you how to hold the room without raising your voice. No one gives you the tools to walk through disrespect without losing your calm, your dignity, or your self-control. Until now. This video isn't just about handling people, it's about handling the part of you that's tired of shrinking, the part that's ready to stop flinching every time someone crosses a line. If you stay with this, you won't just walk away with strategies. You'll walk away with a new way of carrying yourself, one that commands respect quietly, consistently, and without apology. Before we dive in, I have one question and I want your honest answer in the comments. What's one time you stayed silent and they took it as weakness? Share it below. Not just for you, but for the next man who's still figuring out how to carry his silence with strength. Your story might be the one that wakes him up. Let's begin. Way 1. Outgrow the argument. There was a time when you couldn't walk away. You felt it in your chest, that burning need to explain yourself, to correct their version of the story, to make them see what you meant. Every insult, every subtle dig, every sideways glance that carried disrespect hit you, and you hit back. Not always with anger, sometimes just with logic, but the fuel was always the same, the belief that if they understood you, they'd respect you. But you've grown since then. And with that growth came a hard truth. People don't disrespect you because they don't understand you. They disrespect you because they don't care to. And when you finally absorbed that truth, something shifted. You stopped chasing understanding. You stopped arguing, not because you didn't have something to say, but because you finally understood that not every fire deserves your oxygen. You began to feel something new. Not weakness, not defeat, clarity, a calmness that grew louder the more you stayed quiet. You learned that silence is not surrender, it's strategy. The more you observed, the more you noticed how arguing never really fixed anything. You could win an argument and still feel disrespected. You could make a brilliant point and still be dismissed. You could pour your soul into your words, and still nothing. That's when you realized you were playing the wrong game. You didn't need to win the argument. You needed to outgrow the entire arena, because real respect doesn't come from verbal victory. It comes from presence, from posture, from energy, and none of those require a single word. So now, when someone questions your path, mocks your tone, or challenges your values, you don't lean in. You don't gear up for battle. You lean back. You observe. You let the noise swirl around you like wind around a mountain. You no longer step into every ring they draw on the floor. You've built something too stable to be shaken by shallow attacks. And when they realize you won't fight them, they feel it. The emptiness of their own provocation, the silence where a reaction used to be, and that silence says everything. It says, you've moved on, you've stepped above, you've evolved past the point where someone else's misunderstanding of you deserves a response. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you sovereign, a man who doesn't trade dignity for debate. You're not afraid of conflict, you've just stopped needing it to prove your power. There's a difference. You no longer need to be right in their eyes, because you already feel right within yourself. That is the root of your quiet dominance. And it's what Epictetus meant when he said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Let them underestimate you. Let them misjudge your silence. Because while they talk to feel important, you're busy building. While they argue to feel seen, you're working in shadows, creating a life so solid it no longer needs defending. So now, when someone pushes you, disrespects you, provokes you in front of others, you don't flinch. You don't take the bait. You don't react. You simply look at them and let the moment pass through you. You don't engage. Because the moment you explain yourself to someone who already decided to disrespect you, you've lost, not in truth, but in energy. You know better now. Your time, your calm, your self-respect, it's all worth too much to trade for a temporary ego boost. And that's what makes you dangerous in the best way. You can't be triggered. You can't be lured. You don't rise to every shout because you've already risen above it. You've outgrown the argument. And now, you carry a different kind of strength. The kind that walks into a room and doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that holds eye contact and speaks only when it matters. The kind that makes people think twice before they disrespect you, not because you're intimidating, but because you're untouchable. You're not loud. You're clear. And that clarity is something they can feel. The ones who used to provoke you, they don't even bother anymore, because they know they can't reach you where you live now. You've built too high, too deep, and too far from the noise. And that, right there, is the power of outgrowing the argument. If you've ever reached that moment where silence felt stronger than any argument, leave a comment below with just a few words that capture your shift. Say it in your own way. Or borrow this: I've outgrown the noise. Let silence reclaim the room. There's a moment when a man realizes that speaking isn't always power. Sometimes, the real strength lies in what he withholds. You've seen it happen. Maybe you were in a meeting, and someone made a slick remark loud enough for others to hear, sharp enough to sting. Maybe it was a partner, a friend, a colleague, someone who knew exactly where to jab. The old version of you would have responded instantly. You would have cracked back, corrected them, maybe even escalated it. You'd feel that tightness in your chest, that heat in your jaws, physiological alarm that says, you've been disrespected. Do something. And for most of your life, you did. You tried to take control by getting louder, by proving you wouldn't be walked over. But with time and pain, you learned something counterintuitive. That control doesn't always come from expression. It often comes from stillness, from restraint, from silence. Silence doesn't mean submission. It doesn't mean you agree, or that you're backing down. In fact, the right kind of silence, the composed, unbothered, unwavering kind, shifts the entire energy of a room. It disrupts the game. See, people who disrespect others often rely on reaction. That's the fuel. They want your voice raised, your words spiraling, your body language twitching. They want to know they got under your skin. But when you give them nothing, no correction, no rebuttal, no visible wound, they're left exposed. And that exposure, that's where the power flips. That's where the room changes. You've lived this. Maybe you didn't plan it. Maybe you just didn't feel like responding that day. Maybe you looked them dead in the eye. Expressionless. 5 seconds. 10. Just long enough for everyone to notice. Just long enough for the air to thicken. And in that quiet, they started to fumble. The disrespect backfired. You didn't have to defend yourself. You let the silence speak. And it said everything. It said, I see what you're doing, and it's not worth my energy. It said, you're trying to provoke me, but I've already decided you don't have that kind of access. It said, I'm in the room, but I'm not in your drama. End 4. Silence like that doesn't happen by accident. It comes from a deeper place of emotional discipline, of grounded self-worth. A man who can sit in silence when provoked is not passive. He is powerful. He is dangerous in a way that makes others nervous. Because they can't figure him out. They can't manipulate him. Because he's not giving away anything. He's not defending. He's not reacting. He's simply holding his ground and making everyone else confront the noise they're creating. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, a man should so live that his happiness shall depend as little as possible on external things. Well, you're not chasing validation. You're not managing impressions. You're not performing. You're just there, fully in control of yourself. And because of that, the room bends around you. That's the paradox of silence. It looks like doing nothing, but it rearranges everything. Think back to a time when someone tried to get under your skin with sarcasm, subtle mockery, hors public critique. You could have answered, you had every right. But instead, you paused. You gave them your full, calm gaze, and nothing else. You let the moment breathe. You didn't rush to fill the void. You let them hang in their own words. And slowly, everyone felt it, that shift, that awkward tension that no longer rested on your shoulders, but theirs. You didn't embarrass them. You didn't lash out. You just made it clear that your peace is non-negotiable, that they don't get to take you out of alignment just because they're out of theirs. You let silence reclaim the room, not by withdrawing, but by holding presence, not by shrinking, but by refusing to perform. That's the thing most men don't realize. Silence is not absence. It's architecture. It creates a container. It tells the world, this is how I move. This is how I carry myself. This is the tone I set, and I will not break it for chaos. No. And once you master that, everything shifts. People don't play the same games around you. They feel your gravity, your restraint, your refusal to be baited. They begin to realize that you're not afraid of conflict. You're just selective with your attention. That you don't talk to be heard. You talk when there's value. And the rest, you let it pass like wind across stone. So the next time someone disrespects you in a room full of people, try this. Pause. Breathe. Say nothing. Let your eyes speak. Let your stillness be the statement. Let your silence reclaim the room. Because when a man no longer needs to respond to command attention, when his presence alone is the boundary, he becomes untouchable. Not loud, not reactive, just undeniably anchored. And in a world that thrives on noise, that kind of silence isn't weakness. It's a form of dominance, one they never saw coming. Way 3. Be unavailable to disrespect. Most men are taught to endure, to stick it out, to be loyal even when the air turns toxic. We internalize this idea that walking away is weakness, that creating distance means we fail to make it work. But eventually, you wake up and you realize that being available to everyone is the very reason you're exhausted. It's the reason you keep getting drained by people who pretend to be close, but only come near when it's time to take. It's the reason you keep explaining yourself to people who don't even deserve to ask. At some point, you stop trying to fix what disrespects you. You stop showing up where you're constantly unseen. You stop bleeding for people who'd never bandage you back. And when that moment hits, it's not loud. It's quiet. It's powerful. It's the beginning of becoming unavailable. Disrespect isn't always screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it wears a polite smile. Sometimes it shows up as constant questioning, subtle dismissal, or the silence of someone who only calls when they need something. And you kept showing up. You kept taking the call, kept giving time, explanations, forgiveness, until the truth broke through. Respect is not something you demand, it's something you allow or deny. And you were allowing too much. You were too reachable, too open, too generous with people who had no business sitting in the front row of your life. But now, you're changing the rules. You're no longer reachable by disrespect. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become clear. Not because you hate them, but because you love your peace more than their presence. You've started to understand that you don't have to confront everyone who crosses a line. Sometimes, the most powerful move is to create space so wide they can't even reach you with their nonsense. And that space, it's not distance. It's dignity. It's the space where your clarity grows, where your self-worth resets, where your energy returns to you. Being unavailable doesn't mean disappearing from the world. It means disappearing from situations where your boundaries are disrespected. It means letting people feel your absence when they've taken your presence for granted. It means stepping back not to teach them a lesson, but to reclaim your own breath. There's nothing weak about that. That's power. That's sovereignty. That's what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." You've realized that you don't need to announce your withdrawal. You just pull back, quietly, completely. And in your absence, they start to notice what they could never see in your presence. You've also learned that access to you is earned, it's not owed. You don't give time to people who disrespect your time. You don't explain your decisions to people who twist your words. You don't sit at tables where you're the constant target of jokes, masked as just kidding. You don't chase closure. You don't chase understanding. You don't chase anything that requires you to abandon yourself just to be tolerated. That's the old you, the one who wanted to be seen. Now, you've become the man who sees patterns, energy, intentions, and you act accordingly. Here's the truth most people won't tell you. When you become unavailable to disrespect, you don't become isolated, you become elevated. You start to rise above the noise. People notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. That you're harder to reach now, that your time has weight, that your presence isn't handed out like a coupon. It's earned through consistency, through mutual respect. And those who don't rise to that level, they fade, not because you punished them, but because you simply stopped participating in their theater. This isn't about cutting everyone off. It's about knowing when your generosity is being abused. It's about knowing when your forgiveness has turned into self-betrayal. It's about knowing when your time and energy are being drained by people who will never return what they take. And instead of confronting them again and again, you just go silent. You let your absence become your answer. You let your peace become your boundary. You let your energy flow into better soil. So here's your challenge. The next time someone disrespects your boundaries, your time, your values, don't argue, don't plead, don't explain. Just pull back. Not with anger, but with intention. Stop being so accessible to what drains you. Because a man who is unavailable to disrespect becomes magnetic to everything aligned with his worth. Be rare. Be disciplined. Be clear. Make your life so deeply rooted in self-respect that only those who speak the same language can find you. And the rest? Let them talk to the silence you leave behind. What was the moment you realized someone didn't deserve your access anymore? Share it below. You never know who might need to read your story. Way 4. Walk away without making noise. Not every door deserves to be slammed. Some just need to be closed, quietly. You reach a point in your life where arguing feels like begging, and explaining starts to taste like desperation. You realize that people who truly value you don't make you prove your worth, and the ones who don't, they never really listen to begin with. So instead of announcing your exit, instead of throwing a final punch, you simply walk away without warning, without noise, without the drama they hoped you'd deliver. You used to think that leaving required explanation, that silence was unfinished business, that people deserved closure. But what you've learned painfully over time is that people who've consistently disrespected you aren't looking for understanding. They're looking for leverage. They want the last word. They want the power to twist your goodbye into guilt. But you've outgrown that game. You no longer seek to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. You don't owe anyone a loud departure. Sometimes, the loudest statement is the one you don't make. Walking away without noise isn't weakness, it's mastery. It takes restraint not to fire back. It takes self-command to leave with your dignity intact, especially when every part of your ego wants to scorch the earth on the way out. But here's what you now know. Fire might feel good in the moment, but peace feels better in the long run. And nothing is more peaceful than knowing you exited a toxic room without leaving pieces of yourself behind. There's a strange power in not explaining, in not clarifying, in not defending why you're done. The people who didn't hear you when you were present won't suddenly start listening because you wrote a long goodbye. You've already said enough with your silence. You've already spoken volumes with your absence. The truth is, when you walk away quietly, the space you leave behind becomes louder than any confrontation could. It forces people to sit with themselves, to feel the gap you used to fill. And sometimes, that silence echoes longer than any speech. You didn't vanish because you were weak. You left because staying was costing you pieces of your soul. Because being available to someone who constantly chipped away at your peace started to feel like slow death. You chose life. You chose air. You chose self-respect. And no, you didn't burn the bridge. You just stopped walking across it. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." It's not selfish to walk away from those who don't. It's not betrayal to remove yourself from environments where you're not respected. It's self-preservation. It's how strong men stay strong. You've learned that your silence is a sacred thing. Not everyone gets access to it. Not everyone deserves to know your reasons. Your life is not a courtroom where everyone is entitled to an explanation. And maybe the hardest part? You don't even wait for them to notice you're gone. You stop checking if they'll come looking. You stop hoping they'll finally say what they should have said years ago, because you've shifted your energy inward. Now, every ounce of strength you used to spend explaining, fixing, tolerating you, reinvest into rebuilding, into becoming, into creating a life that doesn't require validation to feel whole. So when you leave on your own terms, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You're not walking away because you're cold. You're walking away because you're clear. And the quietness of your exit, that's the part that lingers. That's the part they remember, because anyone can scream on their way out. It takes a different kind of man to just disappear with grace, with silence, and with nothing left to prove. Here's the real flex. When you leave without noise, you no longer need to be right. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. You're just gone. And in your absence, your standards become visible, your boundaries become real, and your silence becomes the mirror they weren't ready to face. Walk away without making noise, not to punish, not to win, but to finally honor yourself in a way words never could. Let them sit in the silence you leave behind. Let your peace be the only message they get. That's how you reclaim your power. That's how you protect your spirit. That's how real men exit. Quiet, clear, untouchable. Way 5. Master the space between offense and reaction. There's a moment. It happens in milliseconds. Someone says something sharp, disrespectful, cutting. You feel your jaw tighten, your chest rise, your fists curl just slightly. That flash of heat floods your body. Your instinct screams to react, to defend, to fire back, to let them know they crossed the line. But in that exact space between what offended you and what you do, next lives everything that defines the man you are becoming. Most people live in reaction. They don't think, they fire. They let offense dictate their tone, their mood, their choices, and in doing so, they hand over the keys to their emotional kingdom. But you're not here to be controlled. You're not here to be predictable, reactive, or impulsive. You're here to lead even yourself, especially yourself. And that begins with mastering the space between offense and reaction you've learned through fire, through failure, that reacting immediately is a trap. It feels strong in the moment, but it leaves you weak in the aftermath. Because every time you respond from pain, from anger, from ego, you lose clarity. You lose control. You lose yourself. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you create just enough distance between what hurt you and what you choose to do with that pain, everything changes. You're not ignoring the offense. You're mastering it. You're becoming so deeply rooted in your own presence that no one else's words can knock you off center. And in that stillness, you make better decisions. You say less but mean more. You respond with precision, not impulse. You reclaim the power most men give away for free. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not a quote, it's a code. And when you live by it, you become unshakable. People can insult you, but they can't move you. They can bait you, but they can't break you. Because you don't react, you choose. This isn't about being passive. This is about being strategic. You've trained yourself to observe instead of absorb, to slow down instead of spiral, to let your response rise from a place of logic and purpose, not pain and pride. Because you know this, not every offense deserves a fight. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every moment requires a reaction. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is nothing until you know what's truly worth your energy. You've seen how powerful this is in practice. Maybe someone mocked you in front of others, expecting you to lash out. Maybe someone challenged your leadership, your character, your worth, thinking they could provoke the old you. But instead of biting the bait, you paused, you listened, you didn't flinch. And in that pause, they felt it, that you were in command, that your silence wasn't weakness, but calculation, that your calm wasn't confusion, it was control. And the best part? That pause gave you time. Time to read the room. Time to decide whether this was worth your voice or whether silence would be louder. Time to stay in alignment with your values, instead of reacting from a wound. That space, tiny as it may seem, is sacred. It's where men are made, and the more you expand it, the more unstoppable you become. This is how real strength operates, not in volume, not in violence, but in restraint, in discipline, in that razor-thin moment where your reaction could cost you your peace, your credibility, your dignity, and you choose presence instead. You choose sovereignty. You choose mastery. So when the world throws a fence your way, pause, breathe, look it in the eye, and then ask yourself, does this deserve me? Or is this just noise? Because once you master that space, you master your entire life. And in a world full of men who are ruled by their emotions, the one who controls Hysis, the one they all feel, but can never shake, master the pause. That's where your freedom lives. That's where your power grows. That's how you rise above the disrespect without ever lowering yourself to meet it. These 5 choices aren't just tactics, they're transformations. Step by step, you become unshakable. If this message struck a chord, it's because you've felt it before. You've been the man who stayed quiet while being disrespected. The man who kept explaining himself to people who never cared to understand. But something in you has shifted. You're done chasing validation. You're done handing over your power for the comfort of being accepted. And that shift, it's not just personal, it's generational. Because every man who reclaims his calm, every man who walks away without apology, every man who chooses to lead himself first, gives silent permission for others to do the same. That's what this space is for. It's not just a channel, it's a brotherhood, a community of men who are tired of being underestimated, tired of being talked over, tired of living small in a world that only rewards noise. We move differently here, with purpose, with clarity, with presence. And when you choose to stay connected, when you subscribe, when you share this message, you're not just upgrading your own life. You're helping build a place where men like you can find the tools, the truth, and the fire they've been missing You're helping make this insight accessible to the quiet ones, the strong ones, the ones who are done explaining and ready to rebuild. Because this isn't about going viral, it's about going inward. And if that's the journey you're on, you've found your tribe. Welcome to the work. Welcome to the calm. Welcome home.